that if you can't consume it all, it will certainly spoil. One other bit of instruction. Make sure that on the day before the Sabbath, make sure that you gather enough manna for 2 days' supply. For I want my people, God tells Moses, to rest on the day of Sabbath. I'll make sure, God said, that the manna won't spoil on that day. But early the next morning after the Sabbath, people were back out harvesting manna to eat, just enough for that one day. And this was the cycle of the Israelites, going out in the morning and collecting manna. They did it for 40 years until they crossed over into Canaan, the land flowing with milk and honey, the promised land. For 14,600 days, the staple was manna, the only thing they had to eat. They ate ground manna, raw manna, boiled manna, baked manna, nothing but manna. For 14,600 days, they ate it. It became a symbol of God's caring for God's people. Later, we will read that God spoke to Moses and said, gather up some of that manna and put it into clay jars. Seal the jars and put them in the ark. Put them right next to those stone tablets inscribed with the law. I want you to do this so that the people are reminded of the one that provided their daily bread. Now, there's a lot of conversation through the centuries about what manna truly is. If we were to read Exodus 16:31, we read that manna is like coriander seed. It is a fine product, and it has a taste like wafers made with honey. The word manna itself comes from the Hebrew manhu, M-A-N-H-U, which means, and get this, what is this? That's the definition of manna. What is this? If you were to go to the Sinai Peninsula and live with the Bedouins for any period of time, the mystery of what is this would be quickly resolved. The Bedouins continue to go out every morning and gather manna, harvest manna, and bake it into a sweet bread. Interesting, isn't it? Here's what manna is. Manna is lice eating the sap of a tamarisk tree, which is plentiful in the Sinai. And these lice have to eat so much of the sap, because the sap is poor in nutrients. They have to eat so much of it that there's an abundance, so much of abundance in their little bodies that they excrete some of the fluids, bug juice, if you will. And this bug juice is rich in carbohydrates and sugar. The Bedouins go out and collect this manna, enough only for one day, because as the sun heats up the day, it quickly breaks down the excretion. Just enough for one day. Does that sound familiar from our text? It should. There are many Christians that would argue with this explanation of manna. To them, it is the bread falling from heaven that is the miracle. I choose to see it in a much different way. I see it in the form of a question. Is it bread falling down from heaven? Is that the miracle? Or is it the one who provides it? Your answer to that question will say a lot about how you perceive God's presence in your own life. If you're waiting for manna to fall from heaven in the form of a butter-crusted loaf of bread, you may find that over time you're going to be hungry. But if you see the miracle of manna as God providing for all of our needs, then everything that comes to you in your life is a gift from God. It's manna. So that can of beans is manna. That warm smile is manna. Your next breath is manna. Is the miracle the substance or the one who provides it? Jesus sat in the upper room celebrating a Passover feast with his disciples. And at one point in the meal, he takes a loaf of bread and he lifts it before God and gives thanks. And he breaks the bread and he shares it with his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body given for you." In John's gospel, he says, "I am the bread of life." What were the disciples thinking sitting there? Was it the kind of bread that they were eating? And what is Jesus saying about this bread? And how should I go about eating it? And is this the only true bread? Is that their thought? Or were they thinking about the sacrifice that Jesus would be making for their lives? That Jesus would be ever present with them, ever providing for their needs? This morning, churches around the world are gathering together for communion. Oh, there'll be all kinds of bread offered this day in many different forms. There'll be all kinds of juices or wines served as well. And it'll be done in a variety of styles. Question becomes, is it the bread, the cup, the style of communion? Or is it the abiding presence of God in it? Today you are invited to the table. God is present with us. Is it the substance or is it the presence? That's for you to decide. Amen.